Well, welcome everyone to Lunch at the Club with the Co-Investor Club. Today, I'm honored to have as our special guest Coach Joe Moglia, who I met through Coastal Carolina. Joe is the former CEO and chairman of TD Ameritrade, chairman of Fundamental Global Investors, Capital Wealth Investors, chairman of FG New American Acquisition Corp, and chair of the athletics and executive advisor to the president of Coastal Carolina University. Prior to 2019, Joe was the head football coach at Coastal Carolina. In his first 5 seasons, he led his team to the national playoffs all 5 years and was the conference champions 4 times, posting an overall record of 56-22 and a winning percentage of .718. In his last 11 years of college coaching, he was part of 8 championship teams. He also received multiple Coach of the Year honors, including the Eddie Robinson National Coach of the Year Award, was the recipient of the Vince Lombardi Award, and was inducted into the Lombardi Hall of Fame and was selected to the conference all-decade team. Joe has been a football coach for 25 years, but is not a traditional 25 years. He began his career as a coach for 16 years, moved to the business world for over 20 years, and came back to coaching in 2009. In the business world, he was at Merrill Lynch for 17 years before becoming CEO at TD Ameritrade in 2001. When Joe stepped down in 2008, shareholders had enjoyed a 500% return. In 2009, he became chairman of the board and stepped down in 2020 when TD Ameritrade was acquired by Charles Schwab. The combined company should be worth $100 billion with client assets of over $7 trillion. When Joe arrived, these numbers were $700 million and $24 billion. Coach Moglia has received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor and the Sharp Trophy for Leadership. He has been honored by the National Italian American Foundation, the Columbus Citizens Foundation, the Irish Arts Center, and the American Institute for Stuttering and the Stuttering Association for the Young. He has been inducted in the 7 Hall of Fames, is a member of the National Economics Honor Society, and is the recipient of 3 honorary doctorates. Joe has already had a book written about his life. He is the only author in the world who has written books both on investing and football, and is currently writing a book on leadership. And for our premium members watching us today, Joe made a very kind offer to send a copy of his book, Fourth and One, that will be mailed out for those watching this today. Welcome, Coach. Welcome, friend. Joe Moglia.
Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And by the way, that book, the Fourth and Goal book, that was the book written about me. So I didn't write that book, but it's supposed to be it's a good story. It's a good story.
It's a great story. So Joe, our audience is, members, the premium members of our Co-Investor Club. And as I shared briefly with you over the last few years, as I started this, I have a bunch of young people that graduated from Coastal, that's near and dear to both of our hearts. And we created this program to share good information for people making their own personal investment decisions, as well as introducing them to high quality managers that are out there and sharing their best ideas. And today we feel very fortunate to have you on a big day for your business career with the company you were involved in, today being, traded under their own symbol.
So we created SPAC, and our ticker is FGNA. And we said that typical SPACs, you get a lot of money in a SPAC and a promote up front, but you got to deliver, and the promote could very much be negotiated down. But so what happens most of the time, you do a deal, then the SPAC sponsors walk away and they take their promote and they're happy with that. So I made it very clear to all my guys in the beginning was that we're not going to do that. So we're going to find a company that we believe in management, we believe in their strategy, we believe in their ability to execute, and we want to be partners with them long term. And so, which is what we did. So of the 600 or so SPACs, there's only three companies at the SPACs, the company that has that have made money the last 3 years. Ours, OppFi, which became public today. So today was a de-SPAC. So Fundamental Global America fell away, and OppFi now is the one that exists. And we did, for the first time, I did an interview this morning with our CEO, Jared Kaplan, on CNBC. When we're over, I'm going to do one on Fox Business, and I'll do that with him. So and then there's only, of all those SPACs, there's only one company that actually had a 50% compound annual growth rate in revenues over the span of the last 5 years. That's OppFi. So I've all the stock that I get paid from this, I have locked up with the company. So I'm going to be a long-term partner with them, and they have access to me in terms of they want to discuss strategy, whatever, however they might want to use me. I'm happy to be able to kind of advise or counsel them on or be involved with. So thanks, Mike, for even bringing that up. So that's actually a very big day. Today was the D-SPAC. Fundamental Global America that I was chairman of falls away, doesn't exist. OppFi now exists. So technically all my stock is OppFi stock now.
And in interest of full disclosure, I am a shareholder in OppFi. When I saw you started this and were involved, I bought stock in my retirement account, and I plan on leaving it there as well and being a long-time investor.
Let's hope we both do well on that one.
Well, I'm confident we will. So, but I think share, Joe, a little bit about, your life, because I think it is a fascinating story. And again, I met you through Coastal, so I didn't have the ability, I didn't know you prior to your Wall Street career in there, but then obviously me playing baseball at Coastal on a couple of boards there, very active with the Coastal community. I was excited when you got the opportunity, and our mutual friend, Coach Gilmore, we had dinner one night. He wanted us to meet, and that friendship started, and I consider you a friend today. So, but tell our people your story, because it is fascinating.
But Mike, first of all, the most important thing you said is that you consider me a friend as I do you. And that means a lot to me, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate, your number one, what you've accomplished in your professional career, but also your love of the school that you spent it, that you went to. So my background, my dad was an Italian immigrant. He came over here when he was 11, couldn't speak English, never finished 8th grade, ultimately sold bananas and apples in the Bronx his entire life. I actually worked for him from the time I was 10 to the time I was 22. Then he married my mom, who's an Irish immigrant, came over here at 24 to marry him. She never had more than a 10th grade education. We lived in the Dyton Street section of New York City. It was a gang area growing up. Parts of it today is still a gang area. And I was the oldest of the 5. So 7 of us lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. And I mentioned it was in a gang area. And 2 of my very, very best friends in high school got killed. From grammar school, got killed in high school. One died of a drug overdose. The other was killed by the police robbing a liquor store. I've done a lot of things. I've been drinking since I was 10. I started drinking when I was 10. I stole, got in fights all the time, but I never did drugs. So my buddy that didn't make it there, I would not have been with him. But not a maybe. Had I not been playing high school football, I'm 100% with the guy robbing the liquor store. And he was killed by the police. So that learning that also kind of woke me up, and I really wanted to try to have the best high school education I could. And I did well in football and baseball, and I was being recruited for both. And I wanted to go to the school that would allow me to play both sports. Instead, now here's where I get personal. Well, it's personal about everything I said up until now. But so my girlfriend got pregnant. So I couldn't go to college and play sports. So there was no scholarships. There was no fight. There was nothing. And my dad's advice to me was, good, don't go to college, work with me full-time in the fruit store. Maybe one day we'll have 2 fruit stores. And I said, Dad, I think I really got to go to school. And he said, I think you're making a big mistake. And then he reminded me we had no money, so I'm going to have to handle it myself. I said, I'll figure it out. But again, think of my situation at the time. Yeah. And my dad's telling me I'm making a big mistake by going to college. All right. So my freshman year, I go to Fordham University in the Bronx, and I got to pay every dime of my education, plus support my wife and daughter. I'm driving a yellow cab in New York City, a truck for the post office, and working at my father's fruit store. Now, I think a lot of you might get this, that it wasn't the most fun a freshman ever had in the history of college freshmen. And when you analyze it a little bit, it was also the only time in my life where I didn't have sports. So I went to Fordham Prep, which is all boys Catholic high school in the Bronx, on the same campus as Fordham University. And I had a pretty good career there. And they had a change of coaches, and they offered me a coaching job. So my sophomore, junior, senior year, I majored in economics, really thought I wanted to go to Wall Street, coach football during the season. I worked for my dad in the offseason. By the time I became a senior, I really loved the coaching and decided if I could get a head high school football job, I'd pursue that. If not, I'd go to Wall Street. I remember I did have 3 years of coaching experience. Applied about 100 schools. I got a job as the head coach at 22 years old. I'm still the youngest football coach in the state of Delaware. At 22, I get the Archer Academy job in Claremont, Delaware. Now, another guy that played football there, graduated a few years before I got there, but I got to know him a little bit through that, is President Biden. So our president played football and went to the same high school that I became the head coach of.
Wow.
And I was proud. My ultimate goal is to be the head coach at a major school. And I was proud of where my career was going. You fast forward a little bit, it's 1981. I'm now the defensive coordinator at Dartmouth in the Ivy League. And I wrote a book on football. Then it was published around then. And that same girl I married when I was a kid, well, we now have 4 children. And football's not an easy life. It's you're 7 days a week, it's 80 hours a week. There's no days off for 5 months. Your entire career is dependent upon what you do on Saturday. Well, we're in the middle of a staff meeting in October. I remember it was like yesterday. And the sheriff from town comes in and needs to see me. I thought there was a death in the family. He says, Coach, I'm really sorry. He has me divorce papers. So I can't afford to live independently and take care of my wife and 4 children. So I get permission to move into the storage room by the football offices. I didn't mind that so much, but it had no heat. So this is New Hampshire. So 4 or 5 months a year, I could see my breath in my home. And I lived there for 2 years.
Wow.
January 1984, the Orange Bowl, Miami upsets Nebraska for the national championship. There's a little bit of a story to this, but
yeah,
get down to it. They ultimately offered me what's going to be the defensive coordinator job. Now I can go for the defensive coordinator job in the Ivy League, defensive coordinator job in the our national championship team. And Miami was the team of the 80s, and every one of those guys got major jobs, college, pros, etc. I could not have a more perfect opportunity for my goals and the progression in my career. But I could not have a more perfect one. But I just mentioned how long coaches work. Back then, too, we didn't make much money. So I'm going to live in Coral Gables, in University of Miami. But my kids still going to live in New Hampshire with their mother. I can't afford to fly back and forth. And I recognize for 6 months a year, I'm not even going to see them. And toughest career decision I've ever made, Mike and folks, was I turned down that job. But I didn't think I could do my job as a coach if I couldn't live up to my responsibility as a father. So if I turned down that job, then clearly I couldn't stay in coaching because nothing was going to work. So I always had the interest in Wall Street. And I just hustled, and eventually Merrill Lynch gave me an opportunity and put me in their institutional MBA training program. There were 26 of us, 25 MBAs and 1 football coach. And everybody said, this football guy's clearly not going to make it. I mean, I didn't know how to spell stock. I didn't know how to spell bond, but it worked out okay. And a few years later, all those MBAs were working for me. I could not be proud of the career I had in Merrill Lynch. I was there for 17 years. And remember, in the 90s, we had the dot-com boom. Well, March 2000, we had the dot-com bubble burst. And March 2003 was a pretty significant recession we had in our country. And the technology firms, especially the online brokers, were really struggling, going out of business. Ameritrade's going out of business. Bottom line, they offered me a job, and I decide to take it. And I leave Merrill Lynch, a major global financial conglomerate, and I go to a company that's literally going out of business. And Mike, you had mentioned that we had a market cap of 700 million. I was leaving a market cap of Merrill Lynch at 80 billion. And, but we did that. And, our first 7, we were 100% going out of business. And you mentioned some of the stats already. My 7 years as CEO, we wanted a 500% return, which, by the way, outperformed every financial firm in the globe. Warren Buffett, Jamie Dimon, Goldman Sachs in the globe. Yeah. In fact, if we had been a college football team, it would have been like we won 2 or 3 national championships in a row, but not Alabama won them. It would be like literally like Coastal actually winning the national championship in football 2 or 3 years in a row. A big Wake Forest winner. So if that happened, what kind of opportunity do you think that coach would have?
Yeah,
I had never been in more demand in my life. And then but I didn't step down. And the board asked me to be chairman, and I accepted that. I was proud to do that. And then I got a call from a group of alumni at Yale telling me at the end of the 2008 season, the Chancellor football job would be open. Would I be interested? And I remember looking at the phone and saying, guys, I haven't coached for over 20 years. And they said, yeah, but we've done our homework, and we recognize that we know the skill sets a college coach is supposed to have. We not only think you have those, but you actually have competitive advantages other people don't have. There's one problem. Oh, yeah? What's that? This has never happened in 140 years of college football. All right. bottom line, I really think about this for 5 or 6 months. I decided to go back, and I wind up for 2 years in Nebraska, then 1 year in the UFL, and then I was recruited by President David DeCenzo of Coastal Carolina to go down and be their coach, and that's when I moved there in 2012. So I stepped down in 2018. My associate head coach Jamie Chadwell was the guy that replaced me there, which was also very much my wish, and I'm still, by the way, involved with the program. My title on campus is I am executive director of football. So football reports to me. And I'm also executive advisor to the new president, Michael Benson, that we've got. So I'm still very much connected with Coastal, but not certainly with the grind I was as the football coach. And then, I was very much part of negotiating the deal with Schwab. And so when that closed, though, I stepped down altogether. And eventually, the TD Ameritrade name is going to go away. I'm sad about that. But Mike, you pointed out the numbers. I showed up 700 million market cap. When we closed the deal, 100 billion, 24 billion in client assets. Closed the deal, 7+ trillion. So I know we did the right thing for our shareholders and our company and our people. We did all those things. And it was the right thing to do for our company. So I stepped down. I think, that was a pretty incredible record of span of 18, 19 years. So that's my background. Now I know that took about 12, 13 minutes.
That's okay.
That's a 60-year story.
So it's funny because obviously I'm aware of that background. I've before, and a couple of things that I've always thought about when you tell that story is, my dad, he's not an immigrant, but he had a 6th grade education, and he was sent on a bus to go. He was the oldest of 6 to go to Baltimore, live with his aunt and uncle, get a job, send money home, help raise his brothers and sisters. But he also told me this stupidest decision in life, going to college. And so, come work for me, come work in the trucking business. And luckily, my mom, I was good enough in baseball to get a scholarship. And my mom said, go down there and do it. She was 5'2", 105 pounds, a disciplinarian. And she said, when I left the house to go down there, if you don't maintain a 3.0 GPA, you're coming home. And I knew she meant it. And so I was lucky enough to go to Coastal, play for 2 World Series teams, and maintain greater than a 3.0 GPA. And both, I'm sure Coastal Carolina is equally excited over the fact that you didn't go to Yale. You decided to get back to football and come to Coastal. And I'm pretty confident they're excited that I decided not to go to University of Maryland and came to Coastal Carolina, because of the relationship I've had with the university that we both love. So one of the things that always stood out to me about your time at Coastal and football was the time you spent each week with life after football. And having now talked to a number of your former players over the years, without question, that's the one thing they always bring up about their time. Because look, we both know at Coastal, whether it's baseball or football, the chances of them going on to truly make a career in their sport, the odds are not the greatest. So it's really what they're going to do with their education, their experiences, to go on and create a future for themselves. And they all attribute that. So could you share what that was about?
Yeah. So I think it's 2% of college players actually wind up making it in the NFL or the pros. Mm-hmm. And but even if you do that, there's still life after football. At some point, football is going to come to an end. It could happen in your freshman year of college. It could happen after high school. It could happen anytime. Most of the time, though, for college athlete, it happens after college. And so every college football coach in the country would say, "Oh yeah, we want to lay a foundation upon which our guys are going to grow or have careers, etc." So then you ask them, well, what exactly do you do? And they talk, "Oh, we got counselors on campus. We give them talks." No. What does a football program do to help them? In reality, they don't have that much to say other than it's supportive of the concept. So there were 2 things Coastal Carolina did that nobody in the nation did. No, I mean, literally nobody did. And this one was LAF, life after football. And we gave up 30 minutes of practice a week. I'm going to repeat that. We gave up 30 minutes of practice a week. Nobody does that. Clemson doesn't do that. South Carolina doesn't do that. Harvard doesn't do that. Notre Dame doesn't do that. We do that. And we spend that 30 minutes with the team. And we talk about stuff that's got nothing to do with football. Now, it's got a lot to do with leadership and an awful lot to do with things that are really important that's going on in the world now that our guys should be aware of, or things that are going to help them later on in life. For example, finance, budget, etc. So one of the biggest threats in the world to me is terrorism. And I think that's a very big deal. We live in the greatest country in the world, but there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people out there that have unlimited funding that will not hesitate to give up their lives to take our lives away because they think we're evil. Yeah. And the impact that that could have on the globe is very, very significant. And we're not paying as much attention to it as we did a few years back. But this, to me, is the biggest single threat in the world. So I wanted my guys to understand the origins of that, how it happened, how they recruit, how they fund themselves. My guys knew what ISIS stands for. I bet you 98%, I don't care what college you're in, forget student athletes, I bet you 98% of the students in this country don't know what ISIS stands for. My football team did. In 2016, if terrorism is the biggest threat, then how do we take care of ourselves? How do we protect ourselves? It's through the military. So I want my guys to develop an appreciation in the military. And if somebody loses their life, why do they do that? Well, so we can live in freedom. Well, that goes back to responsibilities again. Take responsibility for yourself. Well, how do we take care of the military? Well, we hope our military and political leaders have enough courage to make the decisions they believe are the right decision for our country long term. Well, what right do we have there? We have the right to vote. So in 2016, in 145 years of college football, Division I, II, III, any place, the only program whose entire football team voted in 140 years of college football was Coastal Carolina. Could be proud of that. Now, by the way, there was a lot of promotion with regard to that. And today, the NCAA, this past year, the NCAA announced that they would prefer that the athletes, any sport, get the day off so they can vote. And we've got all the colleges, not all, but many now across the nation say, oh, yeah, we give our kids a day off, we're all voting, blah, blah, blah. So we were the first to do that when nobody had ever done that. So they're the types of examples that, we would talk about in life after football, along with the practical side. What happens if you get pulled over by a cop? What happens if, let's talk about difficult neighborhoods you grew up in. Let's talk about finances. Why is a budget important? Why is it important to save? So these are all things that we spend time on. They've got nothing to do with football, but they are critically important in terms of us as a program helping lay a foundation upon which our guys or our people are going to build their lives later on.
You mentioned leadership principles. I know you had the BAM, principle for football, but you've also talked about that was the same principles you raised your family with in the business world. Can you share those principles that you live by?
Sure, Mike. So I said there were two things that Coastal Carolina did that in football that nobody in the nation ever did. Number one was we gave up 30 minutes of practice a week to do life after football. The other thing, we're the only team in the nation that has no rules. We literally have zero rules. Now, Jamie, my successor, has some. When I was there, we didn't have any. But we had a standard. The standard was stand on your own 2 feet, take responsibility for yourself, always treat others with dignity and respect, live with the consequences of your actions. Now, everybody kind of nods their head, oh, that sounds good. But living up to that is pretty significant. Now, Mike, you mentioned that I raised my family that. Well, I had 3 daughters. They were raised on that. Every female executive I had in the business world, that was the standard. So whether it's football, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's personal, this was the standard I expected me and my loved ones or my people to live up to. Now, it's very, very easy to be able to, again, nod your head to that, but living up to that as a standard is very, very, very significant. Now, in football, I had 125 guys playing. I had another 25 or so coaches, analysts, interns, et cetera, et cetera. So they're all male. So we call this be a man. Now, BAM. So we got BAM on the back of our jersey, BAM on the campus, BAM in the stadium, BAM in the practice field, BAM in the weight room. But that's not sexist. It was never meant to be sexist. But for our guys, a real man, not some macho guy, a real man, a real woman, by the way, or real leader, really about leadership, stands on their own 2 feet, takes responsibility for themselves, always treats others with dignity and respect, and they live with the consequences of their actions. That was the standard upon which, from 2012 on, Coastal Carolina football program was built on.
Another thing that, I've listened to a number of your speeches when I was preparing for this today. You mentioned a lot in your commencement speech that you gave at Coastal, love and your definition of love and how that's played a key role in your life. Can you share what that is?
So within standing on 2 feet, take responsibility. There are 3 principles that are part of that. you need to understand and try to live these three principles for the BAM concept to work, the leadership concept to work. So first was spiritual soundness, put that aside. The second one is courage, put that aside. But the third one is love. So love, love to me is the commitment to the well-being of others. It's not making love, it's the power of love. It's the power of love. So I think you can see that certainly in a team where the team cares about each other. You see that in some businesses, depending on, Mike, I'm sure you've got that at your place. And it can happen in the military, it can happen in schools, it can happen in a lot of different places. It's really a function of leadership. Where it happens automatically, you'd say it'd be like teams. But I think where it has the most profound effect, because people understand it this way the best, is family. So, so the two examples I have of this, and remember, love is the commitment to the well-being of others. And by the way, if a leadership is not about how cool or smart you are, it's about your people. How do you take care of your people? How do you take care of your shareholders? How do you take care of your people? Whether it's football, business, whatever. How do you take care of your family? So it's about others. It's not about you. And so the commitment to well-being of others. So a couple of personal examples that if I might, Mike, can I share these?
Yes, you please do.
Okay, so I mentioned I grew up in a gang. So, I thought I was a badass, and I was about 13, and we had a family meeting. And the meeting was about my mom had to go in the hospital. Yeah, but no big deal. She's going to come up, they'd be in a couple of days, come back out. We didn't think much about it. Now remember, 7 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So it wasn't like you had a whole lot of privacy here. And I remember my dad was kneeling at his bed. I just thought he was saying prayers, and he was crying. And I went over to him and said, Dad, I know what's the matter. But by the way, my dad died at 89. This is the only time in my life I ever saw my father cry. Wow. And he said, I'm worried about Mom. So I went to bed that night, and it hit me. And remember, my mom was an Irish immigrant. By the way, nobody from Ireland ever could afford to come over to this country. So when she got married, they walked down the aisle. There was not one person that she knew from home that was in that church. And for us, for her, the 5 of us, or 5 kids, were everything. She unconditionally loved us. She always had a great attitude. The glass was always half full. And I realized that, we were it for Mom. And I'm going to bed that night and I think, oh my God, I could lose my mother. And I know we're the most important thing to her. And it hit me because I think I'm such a tough guy. I never told my mother that I loved her. And it hit me that just those words would mean the world to her. And I remember really kind of being upset about that. I remember praying that night, God, please, just bring Mom home. And, give me a chance to make up for that. Well, Mom did come home, and I did make up for that. And I feel good about that. Right now, fast forward a little bit. By the way, I just began in Ameritrade. I'm in Ameritrade 2-3 months. We have 9/11. The buildings collapse. Right. Now, you mentioned I began at Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch headquarters was 100 yards from the World Trade Center. I lived 150 yards from Merrill Lynch, 200 yards from the World Trade Center. So I lived right by the World in that same neighborhood, and that's where I worked. And by that time, 2 of my kids, Kim and Kara, Kara and Kevin had gotten jobs at Merrill, and there were 3 of them were living in Brooklyn. The other one was my daughter Kim, and so they're working at Merrill now. They're there alive while this is going on. So one of the things about leadership is you really got to understand if you can't control something, please don't worry about it, because all it doesn't solve your problem tomorrow, but it takes away your serenity. And you need to be able to have that positive energy so you can attack and accomplish different things you need to accomplish. So with regard to this, we go in emergency mode. We've got clients we got to take care of. Remember, we're going out of business. So we got to take care of our clients. We got to take care of employees. We got to take care of their assets. And I can't do much of what's happening in downtown New York City. I get a call from my daughter, Kim, and she says, Dad, I recognize you've got a lot of things going on, but I just want you to know, I talked to Kim and Carrie, they're both okay. I said, Kim, really, that's a great call. Thank you very, very much. She calls about 2 hours later. She says, Dad, I talked to Carrie. She's been evacuated. She went from Merrill to Jersey City, and she's all stressed out, but she's okay. But the last time anybody saw Kevin, he was going over to the site to see if he could help. Dad, have you heard from Kevin? I said, no, Kim. Now, by that time, both towers were down, and he went over to help. So it was a difficult day because the rest of the day, very, very much in my mind, again, I couldn't do anything about it, but very much in my mind, there's a good chance I may have lost my son. Now, as horrible as that would be, I had a sense of peace about it because if I did lose my son that day, there was nothing in the world I would have told him that I hadn't already told him. He knew I loved him. He heard that from me, different things, different points, advice, maybe how to take different roads or paths in your life, how to make those decisions. I told him everything I wanted to tell him. And especially he knew that unconditionally I loved him. That happened with my family because the experience, and even the way I've led in the business world and in football, because the experience I had with my mother when I was 13. So if you take that now and you translate that into the business world or coaching world, whatever it might be, if you're people in the business world, because they know, if they really know you have your best interests at heart, they'll follow you anywhere. They'll do whatever they can for you and for your company. And so a leader that really takes responsibility for themselves and really lives in a way where there's a commitment to the well-being of others, the potential for that being successful and being incredibly rewarding are very, 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 very high. But that's the love concept when I talk about leadership.
Yeah. I read also that you said, on your tombstone, a long time from now, you wanted to say that you made a guy who made an impact on others. So now, as you're here today, as you move forward, what do you see as what you're going to spend continuing to make that impact on others now that the TD Ameritrade, deal closed? You're coaching. I know you're still involved with Coastal, which we're thankful for. But what do you see going forward? You want to accomplish?
Well, so the people that I've been involved with in my life. So, for example, remember my very first coaching job, I was in college. I coached at Fordham Prep where I went. Well, that was 1968, 68, 69, 70. I have about 10 guys from back then that I coached that have been to my games. First school I went to, Archmere, where Biden had gone to, there's about 15 guys that I coached that have been to my games. And that continues at Pencrest, at Dartmouth, at Lafayette, et cetera. So the impact you have on others is not something that just works out for a day or two. It becomes part of your life over a long period of time. That's what at least my objective is. So I think as simply as they go forward, because of the career paths I've had, two entirely different career paths, plus my family, my personal life, there's a tremendous amount of people that have been in my life one way or the other. It's not a small group. It's a reasonably large group. And we do everything we can to kind of stay in touch. We do everything we can to have reunions. It's not uncommon when I get a call for somebody that's really going through a tough time and wants to be able to talk about it. Not uncommon for somebody that's got a little money, didn't have it before, and wants to know what to do with it. So I think just literally, I built up so much of a family group of people that I have been closely involved with, that I know I had an impact with over the decades, that just frankly staying on top of that, staying in touch with them, I think is a great step in the right direction. You had mentioned earlier, I wrote a book on football and investing. I'm writing a book on leadership. Hopefully that's going to have an impact on others. I was asked, Deion Sanders is the second year head coach at Jackson State. And he invited me out in October to talk to his players. And we'll pick a time where it's not going to conflict with Coastal to talk to his players about life after football. Yeah. What does that really mean? What's important? What matters? What doesn't matter? Et cetera. And talk about the band philosophy. I know Jamie, our head coach, is going to ask me to talk to our players, have an LAF session or two about how we do on our financials. How about, again, most families do a better job planning a family vacation than they do finances, right? So we'll be able to talk to them about that. And now this whole ILOL, that whole thing going on now, and in college, where the players have an opportunity to be able to make some money on different things. There are going to be a lot of questions with regard to that. I know I'm going to be asked my opinion with regard to a lot, but I don't have any control over that. But they're the types of things. I think I just continue to live my life the way I've lived it and maintain the contact and that I've had with others that hopefully I've had done a good job of touching.
When you look back on your career, who's influenced you? in each of the stages. I'm sure each stage you made and your changes to go from one to the other, there was someone who influenced you.
When I began as a coach, I read everything I could about Vince Lombardi and John Wooden, the basketball coach. Two totally, absolute opposite approaches, but both very, very, very successful, both very, very, very thoughtful, both very bright people, etc. And because they were different, I thought I could learn different things from each of them. And I still was trying to formulate what kind of, coach, how I was going to approach a profession myself. In the business world, certainly, I've gotten to know, being in Omaha, I've gotten to know Warren Buffett pretty well. I would consider us friends. I think he would the same. And then different people that maybe stuff I read about, Lee Iacocca, for example, I have a lot of respect for. But different people that I've met in the business world. Some of the people that work for Merrill Lynch, Jamie Gorman, the current CEO of Morgan Stanley, we work together in Merrill Lynch. He's a good friend. We're in regular touch. Jamie Dimon and I are not good friends, but we do know each other and we touch base once in a while. So all of that would be something I can throw out there. But where I really, 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 really positively know that where I had the greatest impact, and I don't mean this cliche wise, was what I learned from my parents. So I already mentioned my mother. My mother had glass half full, unconditional love, always had a smile on her face. Again, you couldn't disobey her, but it was always positive. And I think, frankly, my personality, my sense of humor comes from my mom. On the other side, Dad, well, certainly I loved him, and he worked 14 hours a day, 6 days a week in the store. We never took a family vacation, and his priority was to make sure he takes care of his family. I certainly have that from him as well. He worked very, very hard. I certainly have that from him as well. He wanted to do whatever he did. He wanted to be excellent. I certainly have that from him as well. But my dad also, the glass was half empty, and any problem was never his fault. It was always somebody else's fault. And because he had no hobbies, he developed some real stress over, decades just working in the food store. And he had like 3 guys or so working for him, but he didn't treat those guys well. He was yelling and screaming at him for something. He was yelling and screaming at me. And so one of the things that I learned from working with him, again, positives, work ethic, be the best you can be. Make sure you take care of your family and loved ones. But on the other side is, how do you manage people? Do you take responsibility? That's my entire thing. Bam.
Yeah.
It was the opposite of what my father did. So much of what I learned and the leader I think I became, and I think I've been a good one. I think I am a good one. A lot of that I learned from my father in terms of what not to do. So the real growth I've had over time would come from my mom and dad more than it came from anybody else.
No, I share that actually. When I look back, as I said, I was born 1 month after my dad turned 21. He was a Baltimore City police officer.
Yep.
Got his GED to become that. And my mom, as I said, was 5 foot 205 pounds, but she was the disciplinarian and she was the tough one. And she was the one to make sure we got every game. And even back then, unlike today, my grandparents played a big role. And I know your parents being immigrants, that wasn't probably the case. But in my case, it was. I never saw my grandfather walk. He had multiple sclerosis. He was in a wheelchair, but he never died. And so when I donated the locker room to Coastal Baseball, I named it after him, because, that's that memory of him never missing a game in a wheelchair. He was a diehard. So Joe, what's on the top of your bucket list that you'd like to do, in the near future?
Yeah. Mike, to just kind of add to the story you shared about your dad, which I think is great. My mom, again, she had 5 kids. There had a lot of things going on. She would try to make. We hear a noise. You guys okay?
We're okay. Okay.
Okay. She tried to make my games when she could. She tried to come to a practice every once in a while if she could, but she had a million things going on. So I was very grateful when she showed up with 1 every 7 or 8 games, baseball, twice a season, 3 times a season, football. My dad, I think a lot of this is because, you're working in a store, of course, but he didn't like me in sports. I was the only person in my family who was involved in all sports. My brother and sisters weren't. And part of that was we got no encouragement from my father. If I'm playing football or baseball, I'm not in the food store.
Yeah.
My father never saw me make a tackle. He never saw me get a hit.
But it's funny because my dad was the same. My dad, busted his, butt to make sure our family, he could provide for us. And I I have great admiration for that. So I think, like you said, I've gotten skills from both of them and also learned things that probably I wanted to make sure I did differently. And,
Yeah.
but in the end, you know, I always say, you know, luck plays some role in everything that we do. And, I feel lucky every day that I had the parents that I have. So I'm very fortunate there. And
Yeah,
hopefully I believe my kids feel the same way.
I think the idea of gratitude is something that is really a special thing that sometimes we forget. We take for granted. I think one of the advantages of the COVID thing is that because we had more time, hopefully more people spend a little bit more time, again, spiritual soundness, thinking about who am I really, what am I doing, what's my purpose in life? So we come out of the COVID with a little bit better understanding of who we are. If you didn't do that, it was incredible opportunity lost. The other thing about that, though, is you come out, you realize what we had, and going in, some of those things taken away, and you start to appreciate what we actually have, especially in this country, relative to other countries, especially in certain families, relative to other families. But too often we take that for granted, and the gratitude piece is a big deal, big part of that.
Well, my friend, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I know you got a busy day after this, so I'm respectful of your time, and it means the world to me. And those who are in the Co-Investor Club, I'm sure they appreciate it. And so,
Well, Mike, two things. First of all, I'm really flattered and honored that you asked me to be part of this. And for the members of the Co-Investor Club, I realize that this is not set up where you can have Q&A, but I would offer this up. If any of them have any questions of me, just send them to you and I will answer them.
okay, I'll make sure
Okay,
that.
I'd be glad to do that.
Look, we anticipated we could potentially have some, but I also realize the time. So I will do that. I will make sure
Okay.
anybody does. And again, thank you for the offer, and we'll make sure everybody gets a book. And we'll be on the lookout for that book when it comes out, when you write it. But in the interim, I'm going to see you in the fall, I'm sure, at a few football games. And I know you got App State up at App State again this year. So if you make
I'll
that,
definitely see you there.
if you make that trip, you got a place to stay.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
All right,
Thank you,
buddy. Thanks for
everybody.
everything. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.